when the lilacs came back. Seattle, Washington, 2014. Rain had a rhythm here, and so did heartbreak. After her fiancé left, Amelia rented a one-bedroom apartment above a vintage bookstore in Capitol Hill, where the windows fogged from breath alone and the neighbors played jazz too loudly through the floorboards. She worked remotely as an editor and rarely went outside except to buy milk, paperbacks, or silence. Her therapist said the loneliness wasn't just grief. It was trauma, unresolved and buried. She had spent the last 2 years in survival mode, pretending productivity was progress. She hadn't cried in months. She hadn't felt much of anything. Until Noah moved in across the hall. He introduced himself with lilacs from a local market and a nervous smile that looked like he hadn't used it in a while. He was rebuilding too. That much was clear. His voice was soft, almost too careful. He told her he taught high school art and had just taken leave. He didn't say why. She didn't press. Their first real conversation happened over shared laundry and mismatched socks. He asked her what she did. She said, "I rearrange other people's words because mine don't come out right anymore." He looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. Noah invited her to his apartment one evening. It was messy in a charming way. Canvases stacked against walls, coffee mugs doubling as brush holders. There was a large painting on the easel, unfinished. A faceless woman in a garden of blurred lilacs. "She's someone I used to know," he said. "I don't paint her anymore." Just the space she left. Amelia returned the next night and the one after. It became their rhythm. Her edits, his paintings. Silence that didn't ask to be filled. Some nights they sat without speaking, other nights they spilled. Amelia talked about the panic attacks, the night she stood in the shower until her skin felt real. Noah spoke about the student he lost and overdosed. He blamed himself. He hadn't picked up a brush for months until she moved in. They didn't fall in love all at once. It was slow. Hesitant, a look held a little longer, a shared song, the way he started sketching her profile without asking, the way she began cooking again. Just to watch him smile over something warm, but healing isn't a straight line. Amelia's mother got sick in December. She shut down again, pulled away, answering his texts with one-word replies, retreating into herself. Noah didn't push. He simply left a lilac on her doormat every Friday. Some wilted before she picked them up. When she finally knocked on his door 2 weeks later, tears on her cheeks, she whispered, "I don't know how to let anyone stay." He replied, "Then don't just let me come back." They spent New Year's Eve on the roof, wrapped in blankets, listening to the city crackle beneath them. She leaned into him and felt for the first time in years like her chest could hold more than ache. Spring came, and with it a new painting. This one had Amelia's eyes, and the lilacs were in full bloom. Now their apartments are one, the bookstore below still carries her favorite authors, and the jazz still leaks through the floorboards. Noah teaches again, part-time, and she writes now, not just edits. Every Friday, without fail, he brings home lilacs. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive to rescue or repair. It simply reminds you that you're still here, still capable of blooming.
Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Summer of 2005. The sea air always made Ivy feel weightless, like maybe she could finally let go of the heavy things inside her. She spent her mornings working at her aunt's seaside bookstore, organizing the poetry shelf and avoiding eye contact. Her afternoons were quiet, long walks along the dunes, journaling in silence. She had come to the Cape to heal, though she never admitted what from post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what the therapist had called it. After the accident, after the hospital visits, after the sleep stopped coming and her hands wouldn't stop shaking, her friends called it a phase, her mother called it sensitive. But Ivy knew what it really was, the sound of everything breaking, over and over again. She met Theo on a Tuesday when the wind smelled like salt and lilacs. He walked into the bookstore looking for a book of Rumi poems and left with 2 paperbacks and a smile that stayed with her all day. He was a photographer, renting a cottage for the summer, capturing the way light falls on forgotten places. As he put it, Ivy thought he looked like someone who'd been broken before too, but wore it like weathered leather instead of glass. They became something quiet. He'd show up just before closing, asking if she wanted to see a place he found, an abandoned pier, a lighthouse no one visited anymore, a hidden cove that caught the last bit of sun. She went always with Theo. The world softened, her pulse slowed. Her silence didn't feel like a void, but a pause in something deeper. Theo had his own ghost. He told her one night, sitting on a driftwood log under the stars, panic disorder since he was 17. He used to black out in crowds, couldn't fly, hated elevators. I take pictures because I can't always trust my memory, he said. But I never forget how something felt. Ivy didn't speak. She just reached for his hand and let the tide crawl over their toes. They were beautiful and complicated, 2 people learning how to breathe again. Ivy's nightmares still came, but Theo never flinched. He'd sit on the floor beside her bed, reading her poems until the shaking stopped. When his panic came, she would draw little suns on his forearm with her fingertip, reminding him he was still here. But healing isn't always kind, and love can't always save you. In late August, Ivy began to pull away. The closer they got, the more terrified she became. She convinced herself he deserved someone easier, someone whole. So she left a note on his doorstep and boarded the earliest ferry off the Cape. "I'm not ready to be loved the way you love me," it said. "But I hope one day I will be." 3 years passed. She came back in 2008, older, steadier. Her hands didn't tremble as much, her nightmares came less often. The bookstore was still there, now owned by her cousin. The ocean hadn't changed, and neither had the way it made her feel, hopeful and small, like the beginning of something. She walked to the cove they'd visited that first summer. A camera sat on a folded blanket, and beside it, Theo, gray in his beard now, but still smiling like he had back then. "I never left," he said, "didn't need to. I was waiting for the light to change." Ivy stepped toward him, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid. Because some love doesn't demand healing first. It offers the space to begin. Santa Fe, New Mexico, 2001. The desert had a way of swallowing sound, making everything feel sacred. Elena arrived in early spring, trading the chaos of New York for adobe walls and silent skies. She told herself it was a sabbatical, a creative retreat, but the truth was messier. She hadn't painted in nearly a year, not since the Depression returned, like a slow-moving flood, drenching everything she loved in gray. She rented a small casita on the edge of town where the air smelled of sage and dust. Most mornings, she'd sit on the porch with coffee and watch the sunrise bleed across the horizon in oranges and blood reds, too tired to pick up a brush, too restless to go back to sleep. That's when she noticed him. Liam ran the pottery studio next door. He'd arrive at dawn, always carrying a thermos and a book tucked under his arm. He had sun-worn skin and gentle eyes, like he'd spent more time listening than speaking. They exchanged nods at first, then words, then hours.
Elena learned that Liam was a war veteran who rarely talked about the war, but often about the silence that came after it. PTSD lingered in his pauses, in the way his hands sometimes trembled before touching clay, but he spoke of it plainly without shame. "Some memories," he said once, "you don't escape, you just learn how to let them sit beside you without stealing your breath." They became something slow and real. He invited her to his studio, let her sculpt with him even when her hands hesitated. She showed him her old sketches, her half-finished canvases, the parts of her that hadn't seen daylight in years. With him, the world didn't feel so sharp. She began painting again. First just warm tones, then the full spectrum of feeling. He wasn't without his shadows. Sometimes Liam would vanish for a day or two, lost in a memory or a weight he didn't want to explain. But he always returned, softer, holding a new bowl or cup he made in the dark. Elena never asked him for more than he could give. She had her own quiet battles, after all. They weren't perfect. There were arguments, days she felt too heavy, nights he couldn't sleep, but they never stopped returning to each other like gravity, like breath. One morning in late summer, Elena painted Liam in the light of dawn, his profile silhouetted against the window, surrounded by bowls he had no intention of selling. It was the first piece she signed in over 2 years. She named it The Safe Place. That fall, a gallery in Santa Fe offered her a solo exhibit. She almost said no, afraid of being seen again, but Liam stood beside her as the doors opened, his hand steady in hers. Now, years later, that painting still hangs in their kitchen, sun-faded, worn at the corners. They drink coffee beneath it every morning, watching the light pour in through the same window. Not every day is easy. The old aches still return, but they've built a life where healing is not a destination, but a rhythm, a promise that no matter how dark it gets, they'll keep showing up together for 1,000 more orange mornings.